Hello, everybody. How you doing today? This is Sakoni Prince, and I cannot tell you how excited I am for this episode of our podcast, Heal. And Heal is an acronym for Help, Elevate, and Learn. And it's based on the book that I'm going to be releasing soon about it's a guide for healing your inner child. And I am so excited today because I actually have a special guest that's going to be coming on in a little bit to share some information with us that I believe is really going to help all of us get to a better place and a better space when it comes to understanding our inner child and the healing that's needed to be done for us to be a better version of ourselves. You know, one of the reasons I started writing this book and one of the reasons I've been taking this direction is because I realized that my slogan is I'm Sakoni Prince of SakoniPrince.com, where we make motivation personal by introducing you to yourself. But I quickly realized that I was forgetting about one very crucial aspect of our personality, and that's our inner child. I spent time introducing people to their adult version of themselves, but I realized that there's a part of us that oftentimes shows up at the most inopportune times. And if we don't take the time to actually get to know that part of ourselves that is still like maybe wounded or hurting, may feel ignored or overlooked, if we don't spend time doing that, we'll find ourselves acting out and our behaviors reflect that. I'll tell people all the time, never let your emotions drive because they're not covered on your insurance. I'm going to say that again for those that are taking notes. Never let your emotions drive. They're not covered on your insurance. Now, somebody would say, well, Sakoni, does that mean I'm not supposed to have any emotion at all? No, that's not the case. We all have emotions. We all go through things and we have a response to them, an emotional response. But when we make decisions based on those responses, we can sometimes get it wrong. And that's like giving the keys to a child and saying, here, drive my car. But then you have to be responsible for the damage that's caused. And that's what happens when we let our emotions take the driver's seat in our lives. When our behaviors reflect the fact that we don't have the level of emotional intelligence needed to calm ourselves down and to deal with something in a rational manner. And sometimes, quite frankly, that means just walking away. But today we're going to be talking about actually how do we do that? What inner child healing is and how do we make the most of that? And I have a very special guest of mine out of the great state of Dallas, and I'm going to bring her on screen right now. Hello, Miss.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thank you.
We are so glad to have you. So I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and tell a little bit about what it is you do.
Okay. Which life? I've lived about 3 or 4.
Wow.
So in this life, Develda Edgington, founder and CEO of Feminine Force Marketing. And I help neurodiverse, feminine conscious entrepreneurs heal, what we're talking about here tonight, and discover and brand their brilliance. So heal from neurotypical wounds, and we can talk about that later. What are neurotypical wounds for the neurodiverse? And then take their brilliance and brand it and build a business around their unique gifts and talents, because oftentimes we don't fit into society's norms or corporate, and they are the ones that cause the neurotypical wounds. So I help them figure that out and heal and not put them back in that environment, but help them brand their brilliance and build a business around it.
Well, I tell you, I know how important that is because healing is something that all of us need to do. And I think we need to be more intentional about it, more deliberate, and we need to seek clarity when it comes to healing those wounds. First of all, understanding where they came from. And I go about that in my book, and we'll talk about that in another episode. But I just wanted to have this opportunity to really start the conversation. And that's what I want this podcast to be, to start the conversation about inner child healing and the trauma that happened when we were younger that follows us into our adulthood. And I've said before, this is not the end, this is the beginning. I want to make it commonplace for us to really talk about things that have happened to us and things that we really need to focus on, because again, they are still affecting us throughout our life, even today.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to I want to start because I know we talked a little bit on the phone and you definitely had a lot in common, but I wanted to make sure that we kind of followed, the script that we talked about, the questions, that I
Okay.
sent.
We can try. We'll try.
We'll try. We'll try. Okay, so the first question was: Is, in your professional opinion, how important is inner child healing?
Okay. Well, is it okay if I rewind a little bit and just
Of
let your
course,
audience
of
know
course. We're
what
just
gives
having a
me the authority?
conversation.
What gives me the authority to even speak on this topic? Because they're like, we got the brand therapist here, like feminine force marketing. What does that have to do, you know, with what we're talking about here? Well, my background is in psychology. I just did a brief overview at the top. And so, as a therapist, out of California, and I've done it in Japan, military life, traveling all over the world. I did a lot of work with veterans, drug and alcohol treatment, child and families, sex offenders. I was a certified domestic violence treatment for the offenders. I did the offender treatment, the 52-week program that they're ordered to do by the court in California. If they're found guilty of a DV case, they have to do a 52-week program. And so I led those classes. And I also, so just about any area of mental health in terms of therapy and counseling, I
Hmm.
touched on it. However, my passion has always been youth, teens, teens and family crisis, and marriage and family therapy. Those have been the areas where I've honed in on and focused in on. So that sets the tone for that.
Okay.
And now for your question, you said in my professional opinion,
How
um,
important? How important is inner child healing?
how important is it? Whew. That was a heavy one because I'm going to say the healing of the inner child, the importance of it depends on the harm that has been done to the inner child.
Okay. All right. I'm with you. I'm with you.
Yeah, so we have to know for some it may be critically important that they do it or they're never going to get anywhere in their life. They're going to continuously stay on this hamster wheel, never reaching their goals, never having successful relationships, because that's how much trauma has been done. And if they have not done any type of work in any area of their life in terms of any self-discovery or no type of evolution. People used to always tell me, well, D, you're more evolved. And I'm like, but I'm not evolved because that I'm better. I've been through a lot of challenges. I've had to grow through a lot of things. So when you
Right.
go through a lot of things, you have to grow through them. And so the importance of inner child work depends on the person. And like I said, the harm that has been done to the person. It looks like we lost Saccone, but I'm going to continue. I guess that just means that this is just me in my
No, I'm
show.
still here. I'm
Oh,
still
oh,
here.
oh, 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 oh. Okay. So
I
the
wanted you to have.
illustration
I wanted to give you, and I probably should have said that. I'm gonna give you
got
the
it because
mic.
I was like, what happened?
No, no, no. There you go. I'm gonna have you go full screen so you can finish
Okay.
talking.
Great, great, great. So to answer that in just a general, broad term, I would say that it is crucial for the emotional well-being of the person, no matter what the level of trauma, because the reality is, even if you had the perfect childhood and you had the doting parents and you had everything you wanted, that doesn't mean that you don't have an inner child that didn't get their needs met. Because a lot of people associate the inner child or healing the inner child with parenting. They think that, oh, my home was this way, but the harm that was done to you in those formative years of your life may have nothing to do with your home life. So when it comes to emotional regulation and knowing how to self-soothe and understanding how to learn from your mistakes and past experiences, overcome and develop healthy relationships, all of that comes from your original source on how you learned it in the first place, which usually goes back all the way back to those formative years in childhood. So it is definitely important for one to at least examine it to see if there is some work there that needs to be done.
Okay, okay. Well, I know for a fact that there are a lot of people that have yet to even consider that stuff is still affecting them.
Mm-hmm.
And we we at times mask it by just saying, well, that's just the way I am. And I tell people all the time, it's not what you do, but why you do it. And rarely do people ask the questions as why am I the way that I am? My journey on personal development really started that same way. I was in a relationship that went south, and I was trying to figure out why I responded or why I reacted the way that I did. And that started me on a path of personal development, which led to leadership development. But now it's circled back to my inner child and what actually went on in those, as you said, formative years that have really just shaped my thinking, shaped my behavior. And understanding that helps me to better navigate today. Understanding what went in or what happened as a child helps me to better navigate how I am today. And I really love what you said about the fact that it's not always necessarily something that happens in the home. It could be something that happens with an extended family or something that happens as a part of an organization, the fact that you're in, that can cause those kind of wounds and traumas. And so, in fact, with that being said, in your professional opinion, should someone just start inner child work? Should they start on that journey?
You said, should they start? Or I think that people, when they should start, in my professional and personal opinion, as doing my own inner child work, um, you have to be ready to be honest and open, and self-awareness is key when you're doing inner child work. So
Mm,
I recommend anybody that is considering that, because we all have an inner child. Like I
right.
said, it just depends on their level of trauma, micro traumas, little micro traumas that happen over time, compound, traumas. So we all
Mm,
have one. But anybody who feels like, man, I just keep going through these same things. Why do I keep finding myself in these relationships? Why can't I ever keep friends? Or why is it that every time I think I'm taking two steps forward, I take, one step forward, I take two steps backwards. If somebody feels like they're at a place in their life where they just can't get unstuck, or they just can't get traction on their goals, or progress past a certain point, I would consider, the child in you, because that's likely some traumas that happened that keeps you stuck in that you don't even know, because we don't know what we don't know. We don't know until we start to peel back the layers and dissect it. When I was in therapy, when I was doing therapy, people would always say, why don't therapists always want to go back and talk about your childhood and tell me about your parents, and so they automatically right away start defending their childhood, and they start defending, my mom loved me and my dad loved me, or my dad wasn't there and I don't care if he wasn't there, I didn't need him. And I say, it's not about your parents, though. Like, I asked you these questions to have nothing to do with your parents. It's about you. She's like, well, how is that about me? Because it tells me the environment in which you were brought up in. It tells me your emotion, how you managed your emotions. It tells me if you were in a loving, supportive environment where you were free to express yourself. Answering these questions about your childhood and about your environment tells me a lot about some of the things you may have picked up along the way that you don't even realize have now become a negative pattern in your life. And while they may have worked up to a certain point,
mm,
they won't get you from here to there. They got you from there to here, but when your next level in life, you can't go to the next level with those set of tools. And so we got to
right,
pick up some new tools.
right.
So I would say
And
that when the person is ready to be open, honest with
right,
themselves,
right,
do the hard work, do the digging, get
right.
dirty.
Yeah.
And that's when
Yeah.
they should start their inner child work.
Yeah. And it's definitely not it's not for the faint of heart. And for those that may have been wondering why I was kind of chuckling and laughing, because I've said some of those same things. I've had some of those same defense mechanisms and those responses, to questions about that, like, why are you asking about that? But that that is critical. It's critical because, again, in those formative years, it shapes a lot of us. And if we don't really consider that that those years kind of set the precedence for the rest of our lives. Now, of course, we can change it. In fact, we can make decisions. But if there are things that are going on, if there's programming going on under the surface or in the background,
In that subconscious mind, that's what I always tell people. There's these things
right?
that happen in your subconscious mind because your subconscious mind doesn't know right from wrong or fact from fiction. It only knows experiences.
Ooh,
So if your early childhood experiences were this way, you got yelled at or combative, and that's how y'all solved problems. And you were used to yelling and fussing and cussing and screaming. If that's what's in your subconscious mind, that's the programming that you just talked about. And
right.
so it doesn't know. Your subconscious doesn't know this is right or this is wrong or good or bad. It only knows experiences. And whatever you've experienced, your subconscious mind accepts it as the way to do it.
Wow. Okay, so just real quick, I know this third question here. It says, "What do you believe is the biggest obstacle to inner child healing?"
Hmm. The biggest obstacle, I would say that the biggest obstacle is probably goes back to like lack of self-awareness, the resisting it because of all of the emotions. Now, there's some people that say, I don't have emotions or I'm not an emotional person. Well, that's an emotion. The feeling that you don't have feelings is an
Is a
emotion.
feeling, right?
So I would say that that is the biggest challenge is because think about it. If you've never been taught how to manage your emotions, chartering into that territory and going over there where all of those feelings and emotions are, that's overwhelming. That's overwhelming. It's like, whoa, you want me to go over there?
Right.
I'm this age or that age. I'm 30, I'm 40, I'm whatever. And I don't know how to manage that over there. So therefore, I'm just not going to deal with it at all. I'm going to turn a blind eye to it instead of saying, I've handled it my whole life this way and it hasn't been productive and I don't want to do it that way anymore. I want to learn how. And that is a scary place to be when you finally realize do you curse on your show? I don't know. Am I a curse or not? But
Go ahead.
who the fuck am I? Because that's
Right.
really what
Right.
happens when you start doing the work. You start to have
Right.
to separate and give back to the people who put stuff into you, parents or caregivers
Mm,
or leaders. And now you start having to separate the wheat from the chaff. Like, okay, I was told that I'm supposed to do this and supposed to be this, but
mm,
that never felt good to me. That never felt right to me, but I was forced to do it. And so now it causes you to question every area of your life. And
mm,
people don't want to do that. People don't want to feel out of control. Like, I can't control me. I don't know who I am. I don't know what's next. Like, and so that's the biggest challenge is people resisting and not willing to say, I don't know, and I don't have all the answers, but I'm
mm.
ready to discover and explore.
Yeah. I think the stigma around, just even talking about it is another challenge, especially for men. Being willing and being vulnerable enough, to confront and even just in fact remember those things that again affected us. I will like never forget being in a situation where it was obvious that there was favoritism shown in the family. I mean, just, you know, when certain people showed up, there was just almost a ticker tape parade. You know, it was just, oh, so happy, so wonderful. You know, in fact, to see them, and then for you sure be like, hey, hey. And I mean, you know, it wasn't from the immediate, but it was still a part of the family, and it had an impact. You know, as if to say, well, why am I not being received as well as they are? You know,
Mhm.
what makes them so special? You know,
Mhm.
but I know myself, just settling who I am with me. And I tell people all the time, until you know who you are, anything can stop. But once you know who you are, nothing can.
Yep, that's
And I
true.
think a lot of people just haven't taken the time to get to know who they are. And that really alludes to what you just said about understanding who you really are.
Who you are, not who somebody else conditioned you to be or told you to be,
Right.
or we just kind of go through the motion through life, and like you said, until you know who you are, people don't want to ask that question because I should know me. I've been with me my whole life. I should know
Exactly.
me. And if nobody else knows me, I know me. And I've heard people say that all the time to me. And God, I am an empath. I'm an intuitive. I'm a channeler. So sometimes I pick up on things from people that God hasn't even revealed to them. So I have to be very careful with it. I have to handle it very carefully. And
Mhm.
I try not to be reckless with it. But in a relationship, in an interpersonal, intimate relationships, when it happens, it's difficult, right? It's difficult to hold on to these things that you see in the person clearly, but they don't see in themselves. And
Right.
so it's like, to the person on the outside, they're like, how could you not see that? How could you not know that you're this way? Well, they
Mm.
really don't. They don't see it because we think we know ourselves better than we actually do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've oftentimes said that in order to get the right answers, you have to ask the right questions.
Yeah.
And we'll ask questions of everybody else, but rarely we ask questions of ourselves.
Right.
So listen, there's something that, and I know I sent this to you earlier. I don't know if I had a chance to check it out, but there is a picture, and to me, it spoke volumes because
Mhm.
it embodied what I've come to understand and know about ourselves. And I want to
Mhm.
put it up on the screen right now. I'm gonna take a second for us to look at it, and then we can talk about it. Okay?
Okay. Yeah, I did check it out. I have
All
some
right, here
thoughts
we
about it.
go. All right, now this picture is a sculpture. It's called the Love is sculptured by a Ukrainian artist, Alexander Mulvey, and the sculpture was featured at the 2015 Burning Man Festival in Nevada. The sculpture appears to represent two humans who are at odds, but each of them has an inner child attempting to connect with one another.
Mhm.
And when I first saw this picture, when I first saw it, I was like, that's it. And I know this, this is really kind of focusing on, in fact, relationships, but and possibly we're in the between a husband and wife and like an intimate relationship and how there's somewhat of discord, but the inner child wants to connect. But even with friendships, even with other types of like relationships, that you can notice and you can see other folks who have yet to mature in a certain area. Sometimes their insecurities are front and center. Their
Mhm.
insecurities show in how they act and how they react in certain situations. And when you realize that okay, that's not the adult version of them, that's their inner child acting out. It's like, how do you how do you address that in such a way that they can be receptive to it? They can start the process of
Right.
looking at themselves. Because I mean, quite frankly, if you tell someone, okay, look, you're acting like a child, they're gonna get offended. I mean, honestly, they're gonna be like, yeah, who are you to tell me that? But if you know how to craft and just help them to again, just take a look at
Right.
themselves.
Right.
Again,
Because
ask the
it
right.
has to be done with compassion. I think that it goes back to the intent. It all goes back to the intent. What are your
Right.
intentions? If your intention is to help them see themselves or to heal, help them heal, whatever that is, then you wouldn't say it like that. You wouldn't say stop acting childish. You would call out the behavior, and you would say, when you do this particular thing, I and I I always usually preface it with, I could be wrong.
See, you sound like me.
I say, I've observed this thing, and it seems to me like every time this particular thing happens, what I'm sensing is you believe, like, you don't trust me, you don't trust my intentions. And so because you don't trust my intentions, that particular thing is coming up for you. I could be wrong, but this is just what I'm picking up on, and this is what I'm sensing. What I've just done is disarmed myself. I've disarmed. Now they know that I don't have any weapons. I'm not coming in hot. I'm not attacking you.
Right.
I'm just making an observation. And that gives them the opportunity to say, okay, you're on it, or no, that's not it. And people don't like when their choices are taken away from them. So if I just come in and say, you're doing this and you're doing that and da 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 da, and this is what I'm picking, even if I say it in a nice tone, well, you're doing this and you're doing that, and I sense that you're doing this, then they're going to be like, no, I'm not doing that, because I took their choice away. Like, I just basically told them who they are. And they're like, who are you to tell me who I am? I know me. I know me better than anybody. And I'm like, indeed, you do. And so in that image, what I saw is the two adults had their backs turned to each other.
Right.
And the children were playing. Imagine where you were talking about, one evolving, at a faster speed than the other. Imagine the adult that's evolved talking to a child. So the child is facing the adult.
Right.
And you're yelling at them saying, you shouldn't be doing this and you shouldn't be doing that. And you need to get over this and get over that and stop doing this and stop doing that. And you're like literally yelling at a child, because that child don't understand what you're saying. They don't know what you mean. They're like, no, that ain't right. That ain't what I'm doing. I ain't doing that. So it's like, it could be seen in a lot of different ways with the children facing each other. And that's when you have those combative relationships. That's when you have those combative interactions with people, that they just feed on each other because those are the children within them talking. But the adults have left the building. The adults ain't even in there at all. The adults are over there looking somewhere else, doing something totally different, and the children are left alone. The children are left at home by themselves to play.
Home alone, huh?
Stay home alone.
Wow. All right. So, and I think we've already kind of talked about this a little bit. And the next question was, how can someone help someone who is struggling to identify the need for inner child work? And I think we talked about that just a little bit, like you said about disarming. So would you say that there was anything else that someone could do to possibly help somebody who's in need of inner child work?
I would say, like you said, support is number one. Sometimes that's all a person needs is just to be heard and seen and not judged. And that gives them permission to do the work. So the minute they bring something to you, it's almost like a test. They're testing to see if you're going to judge them, or if you're going to say, what? Like, or like, are you going to be shocked? And then if you do, then you just told them, and they have now told themselves, this is not a safe space. And good luck getting anything out of them from that point forward. So I would say just support for sure. Support them, listen, don't feel like you have to have the answer, because it is their work to do. You're just helping them navigate it. And if you have already done inner work on your own inner child, share your experiences. Like, tell them, I remember when I was going through this, this is what helped me. And when I was going through it, this is what it looked like for me. I cannot tell you the number of times that I have said that, and somebody said, oh, exactly, that's what, and I was like, yeah, that's how mine came up. Now I already seen it. I've seen it in them. And so that's why I use the examples that I use. I'll say, well, this happened to me, and when I was going through this, and I just remember thinking, man, I came up in a home with a single mom, and she did everything she could. She was strong, and so I built up this, cloak of masculinity where I don't need nobody, I don't need anything, and need a man, and blah blah blah. And then they're like, yeah, like exactly. And these people are like 50, 60 years old, and they're like, I've been that way my whole life. And I was like, yeah. And I'm glad that I was able to do that work to realize that's not how my conditioning, that's not how God wired me. I'm not wired that way. And that's why it always felt so painful and felt so hard and so lonely and so detached, because at the core of who I am a feminine woman at my core. So having to wear this cloak of masculinity as a form of protection, because of how I was raised, at around 35, 37, that cloak got heavy. It got heavy, and I couldn't carry it no more. And that was when I started asking the questions of myself.
Yeah.
Not even asking questions of others. I started self-discovery. Right. Like self-examination. And that's why earlier I said you have to be willing to go within and have some level of self-awareness and be willing to look at those deep, dark places that may not be so pretty. So support for sure, and just share your own experiences. If you've been down that journey of doing inner child work, just share your experiences with them and let it go. If they take it, they take it. If they don't, they don't, but just share.
Right. Okay. Well, and I am so glad, the fact that you put it that way, because, and I'll be honest, I've actually been guilty of oversharing, or I guess I would say we're not really trying to force, but just trying to champion the cause of doing this, But
you're so passionate about it.
Well, but I was doing it from a standpoint of like, there's so much freedom when you do this.
Like, don't you want it? It's like the milk and honey. It's like, oh, it's over there. Come on, don't you want the milk and honey? Let's go over there and take it.
Right. And that reminds me, the last sentence in my book, I said, me and Coney will be waiting on the playground. And Coney is my inner child. He's the name that my mother used to call me when she didn't want to say my full name. And so, again, I want people to get to a place to where they can truly enjoy life and themselves at the same time.
Right. Because healing your inner child, you're not getting rid of your inner child. You're healing them. So so now they're at your level. Now you can move through life with them. They're now next to you versus a few, they way back there behind you because they haven't matured yet. Now you're help. I always say, look at it as your inner child's guide. You're helping them navigate. And so that helps people too. That helps people do their inner child work when they see themselves outside of themselves. So if you look at your inner child as a mentee, you're the mentor and your inner child is the mentee.
Right.
And so you are helping them get to where you are by equipping them with the tools that they need to help you get to where you are today. So when you see those things inside of yourself rise up and pop up, and notice that that's your inner child, say, come on, little Coney. What you say, Coney?
Coney. Come on, Coney.
Come on, Coney. Coney. Now that ain't what we do. We're not doing that, Coney. This is how we do things now over here on this side.
Right.
So it's like, and when people look at it like that, it does seem to feel a little bit better for them too. When they see it as they're the mentor and their inner child is the mentee, and they're their guide. They're their guide, and they're helping them get to this stage and this place in their life.
Yeah. Well, listen, I want to thank you for your time and for being a part of this third episode of my podcast, H.E.A.L. And actually, I have a huge announcement coming next week. I know I've talked to you about it, and I can't really share it just yet, but I am super excited, and you definitely want to tune in for next week. Now, a lot of you know that doing lives are a challenge, and especially if you're trying to do it all by yourself, got multiple screens, got a whole bunch of stuff going on. But I'm getting better at this. And so as we move forward, you're definitely going to see some other things actually come into play, and I'm excited about that as well. But listen, I want to thank you, Ms. Edgington, for allowing us this opportunity to share your Friday evening and for you to pour into the people who've tuned into this podcast and those who are going to listen to it on Spotify and iHeartRadio.
Absolutely.
So are there any closing statements or comments you want to make in reference to what we talked about today?
So people watching this or listening, now or, catching the replay later, they're probably asking themselves, well, where do I start? Like I know that there's things that I want to work on and layers that I need to peel back and dissect. But for some people, it seems so overwhelming. And what I always encourage people to do is, and in therapy, I used to tell people it's not a problem until it's a problem. So if you really look at your life, there are one or two things that have become a major problem in your life and you just can't ignore it anymore. Start there. So if you know that you're combative or that you're hyper defensive every time somebody, or you have trouble in friendships and now it's starting to interfere with other areas. So when it starts to interfere with your day-to-day life and now it's making it hard for you to navigate, your spaces, and you're losing jobs or you're losing friends, or like whatever that thing is, like I would say start there with the most uncomfortable parts, because if you don't get that out of the way, it's not going to allow you to do the other work in the other areas, because it's like that bully, that inner bully. And so it's like they're going to be like, nah, we're not doing that work, And so, and our subconscious mind kind of serves as, I did a whole series on the invisible bully, like the invisible enemy within us. And that is our subconscious programming. And that really ties closely with the inner child. And this was about maybe 4 or 5 years ago. So you have no idea how this is like so full circle for me. And I'm like, wow, I can't believe I'm like circling back around. I talked about this stuff. And I just called it, different things back then. So I would say start there, the most uncomfortable parts of yourself, examine yourself, ask yourself the questions. I am available to support anybody who wants. Contact your friends, support. Don't do it alone.
Exactly.
Don't do it alone. You don't have to, and you don't have to go to therapy. Or I advise, I am a fan of therapy. I am a fan of psychotherapy. I have two. And I have a spiritual Reiki therapist. So I'm a fan of therapy. But if that's too much for you, just find a safe space, a person in your life that you consider a safe space. They're non-judgmental, and you can sit and talk and flush it out with them. But I don't suggest doing it alone, because you may hit some hurdles and obstacles and roadblocks that may be a little bit too heavy for you to carry alone. And so you need a sounding board or a safe space.
That is so, so true. I oftentimes share with people that we all need somebody to throw up on, because the only way our body can heal, especially like if we drunk too much or if we eat something that got food poison,
the thing
our body does is purge, it comes out one end or both, but it does that so that we can start the healing process. And even from a mental and from an emotional standpoint, where, we need somebody. And again, like you said, a safe space where, we can be vulnerable and really work through and talk through those things that are affecting our day-to-day life. And I'm glad that you put that in there. We don't need to go looking for stuff, but if it's affecting your life and how you're interacting and how you're doing your job, dealing with your relationships, whether they be at work or in some sort of organization or at home, again, that's where you start. And a shameless plug, one of the first things you can do is you can purchase my book. And once it comes out, it's going to be everywhere. You're going to find out where you can get it from. And I'm telling you, not that I'm an expert in this area, but again, I know that I've had enough experience to know that I can carry this conversation, which is why I'm doing this podcast and why I wrote the book. But I didn't want it to be like, again, this is the end of the conversation. I wanted to be the start, which is
The
why I have
beginning.
experts like Miss Edgington on here today to actually, again, give us that information that goes beyond just the layman's understanding. And
Right.
she's even shared some stuff which has really helped me. So I thank her for that.
Yeah. And so definitely when your book comes out, I suggest that you do some type of group, group, help people navigate, they purchase the book, they work through it together and,
Right.
and create a safe space, like create that
Yes.
safe space that people can come and share and be vulnerable. Even if it's just virtual, local would be great too, but even if it's just virtual, and then get other people on board, maybe start a safe space for healing in Dallas, a safe space for heal, like, because people need it everywhere. People need
Oh, yeah.
what's in your book everywhere. And so I definitely will be one that's supporting it and championing it and saying, do the work.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, with that being said, we do want to bring this episode to a close, but we want to thank everybody for tuning in. And I didn't get a chance again. Like I said, I'm learning this as I go, but I'm going to be actually asking people to chime in. In fact, let us know, in fact, where they're viewing from, and even any questions that they may have. I didn't get a chance to do it this time, but again, I'm going to be working on it, and I'm definitely going to ask Miss Edgington if she can come back later, probably later on this year, and we can talk a little more. And so hopefully by then I would have gotten everything down pat and be able to actually interact with everybody on all of the platforms, because I'm streaming on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Instagram. So wherever you're seeing this from, please put your name, put where you're seeing this from. And if you have any questions, comments, or criticisms, I take them all. That's the only way we can get
That's
better.
how we grow. Exactly.
That's how we grow, and that's what I want to do. So with that being said, I want to thank you again for your time, and I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and we are looking to grow together.
Yes.
We will definitely talk to you later, and you have a pleasant evening.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.